Welcome, everybody. I'm Paul Whitkay, founder of the Alliance of CEOs, and I'm excited to welcome you all to our latest Alliance Visionary Leaders Roundtables, where we all have the opportunity to learn how innovation and change is dramatically affecting every aspect of our lives. Over the past 3 decades, I've had the front row seat to work with leaders who are developing tools that enable these changes, such as enhanced sensors, digital imaging, big data analytics, robotics, high-speed communications, gene editing, supercomputing, AI, machine learning, and many others. These tools and others are being deployed to transform every industry, and our Visionary Leaders Roundtables are designed to discuss the industries that affect each and every one of us every day: health, transportation, housing, and today, food. I believe it's never been more important for purpose-driven leaders in every industry and sector to come together so we can all learn faster and share ideas and wisdom to prepare and deal with all the challenges and opportunities that we're all seeing. For today's session, I've invited Alliance member Jim Flatt to help identify leaders who are making a difference throughout the food ag value chain and invite them to be on this panel. They all have different expertise and perceptions into a wide variety of food and agriculture related issues. And so before we get going, I'd like to just briefly introduce our moderator today, Alliance member Jim Flatt. Back when I founded the Alliance 29 years ago, he was working at Monsanto, commercializing new biopolymer products for food and pharmaceuticals. Over his career, he's pioneered many different innovative food products and ingredients. He's used AI at his last company to identify functional and effective plants of using AI to analyze tens of thousands of different plants all around the world to determine those who might be effective new food products. And shortly after we agreed to put this panel together, he joined a new company. It's CEO of DMC Biotechnologies, where they're creating bio-based chemicals through precision fermentation. So with that, Jim, take it over.
Super. Thank you for the kind introduction, Paul, and thanks all of you for joining today's discussion. You know, hardly a day goes by when we don't read some aspect about the digital transformation of one industry or another. We often forget that we are integral elements of the physical world. So today I have the pleasure, and I'm joined by 7 guests who are leaders in different aspects of food and agriculture that are really helping shape the future of our industry. And as you may recall from Maslow's hierarchy, food and agriculture is one of the foundational elements, vital to our survival. And so, as many of you can appreciate, food and agriculture has profound impacts on economic development, but also on human health as well as planetary health. And we're now beginning to appreciate those impacts. According to the Rockefeller Foundation, in their major study on the true cost of food and report that was published in 2021, which was really eye-opening for the community, they recognized that at least in the United States alone, food and agriculture was responsible for $1.1 trillion annually in our GDP. Unfortunately, when you calculate all of the other impacts that food and agriculture have on human health and planetary health, the true cost of food is a net negative $2.1 trillion. So it's, if this were a business, if it were not essential, it would not be one that would last very long. So there's both an opportunity and really a pressing need to write that financial equation and overall improve our longevity, our health, and our planetary health. So with that, I'm going to ask all of our panelists, and I'm just going to go around here to briefly introduce themselves. And then we have 4 topics to cover here. And I'm going to have several of our panelists kick off each of those topics. And those topics are consumer trends, food as medicine, transformation of agricultural practices, and financial drivers of the future of food and agriculture. So with that, I'll turn this over to Ashley, and then we'll go around our table and jump into these topics.
Okay, perfect. Everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Good. All right. Hi, my name is Ashley Burkhardt, and I'm the Chief Scientific Officer at Germinate Ventures, which is a venture capital firm that invests in food, agriculture, and frontier science, including some biotech. I also serve as an associate in the Environment and Natural Resources program at Harvard's Belfer Center. And there I have spearheaded study groups on regenerative agriculture and innovation, investment, and policy. So my background's a little different for many investors. I'm actually a medical doctor. I'm a board certified pathologist, and I specialize in lab medicine and also guts and butts. So I've been looking at that under the microscope. So I'm a GI and liver pathologist is my area of expertise. I've had grant-funded research on gut health, specifically looking at intestinal barrier dysfunction. And as a physician, a researcher, and now an investor, I feel like I come with this unique perspective on the critical link between food, the gut, microbes, and health. So looking forward to this conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ashley. James.
Good morning, everyone. James White. I'm a 30-year operating executive with most of that time in the food industry across the likes of the Coca-Cola Company, Nestle, Safeway stores, and then lastly as CEO of Jamba Juice. And then I've also spent 20 years in the boardroom across the food and beverage industry, Simply Good Foods today, Cava the Mediterranean chain, Panera, and then Snooks supermarkets. I'm thrilled to be on the call today. I spend a ton of my time with leaders across all of those industries between restaurants, consumer products, and the retail industry.
Wonderful. Good to have you. Thank you, James. Rini.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rini Greenfield. I'm the general partner of Rethink Food. We are investors in everything from ag tech to food tech to supply chain, all the way to health tech. So we like to say we invest in technologies that are advancing the food system as a whole. My background is in technology investments. So I can say this, I have spent 22 years investing in technology companies. Working on 23. And it's been very exciting to see technical innovations drive, access and drive, innovation to allow for other companies to thrive and new companies to grow. We've invested across, commerce to e-commerce, energy to alt energy, and now we think the next big technical revolution is really in the food system.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mick. John.
Yeah, hi, Jonathan McIntyre. I'm a founder of Nodal Advisors, a consulting firm that works with early stage food, ag, and climate tech companies. I spent a 30-plus career scientist and entrepreneur bouncing between large corporates and early stage startups across a broad variety of industries, multiple verticals, whether that's food and beverage, food ingredients, biotechnology, ag biotechnology, pharma. So it's a topic that I love that we're talking about. And I also see that all of those fields are converging based on the technology that is going to drive success across all of those. And James, I won't hold it against you for being from the red team. I'm from the blue team.
That's quite okay.
Great to have you, John. Jake.
Hello, everybody. My name's Jake Jornstedt. I'm our CEO and co-founder at a software company in Fargo, North Dakota called Bushel. We work with 3,500 grain egg retail, ethanol, and milling facilities around the country, in US and Canada in particular, to help make the process of working with their farmers better. We digitize the workflows. We make it easy for them to sign contracts and sell grain and pay for inputs. That's our job. And we work with these players, the supply chain, the messy middle, the co-ops, et cetera. Those are our customers. And then the end user is the farmer of our software. So we don't generally have anything to sell to the farmer, but they use a lot of our tools. We touch over 100,000, 110,000 farmers a month that use our products around the country. And so pretty proud of what we're doing. We've raised a little shy of 100 million of capital over the last 7 years. My job is to figure out how to return that capital someday to some awesome investors of ours. And we continue to grow every year, and excited about what we're doing in ag, especially it's wild times that we're in. And so we get to hear from our customers what their challenges are every day.
Great. Thank you, Jake. Pam.
Thanks, Jim. And I'm super honored to be here in this conversation. I'm Pam Schwartz. I'm Executive Director in the Office of Community Health at Kaiser Permanente, and I have spent most of my career at Kaiser Permanente, mostly on the 25 years at Kaiser Permanente, and most of those years on the topic of food and nutrition, among other things. But for those who don't know Kaiser Permanente, we're a large U.S.-based nonprofit integrated healthcare system, the largest in the country. And so what that means is we're both the insurance and the provider. So we have about 12.5 million members and about 250,000 employees. And we have a long history of working in obesity and diabetes prevention, and more recently on food and nutrition security. And about 8 years ago, our CEO, Bernard Tyson, who many of you might know, he asked the people of Kaiser Permanente, so over 200,000 people, what are the best ways to create healthy years? And there were thousands of ideas that were submitted, and what rose to the top from those was food insecurity. And so we've been building our muscles here, going from food insecurity to nutrition insecurity to food as medicine, which I'll tell you about later. But I've had the honor and the privilege to lead this work on behalf of Kaiser Permanente and in partnership with many incredible leaders across the country and at times around the world, and all working hard to end hunger and treat and prevent diet-related disease in innovative and cost-effective ways. And so at Kaiser Permanente, we've been working on addressing food and nutrition security for a number of years, as I mentioned, but about a year ago, we launched a Food as Medicine Center of Excellence, and I'll tell you about that later. But there is so much enthusiasm across my organization, and we're seeing it across the nation. And so I'm super excited to be here to be part of this conversation. It's somewhat of an unusual conversation for me to be in, so I'm excited to see where it goes.
Wonderful.
And Pam,
Thank you,
Bernard
Pam.
Tyson was a dear friend and an incredible visionary.
Agreed. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And finally, Maggie.
It's okay, Jim. You can confuse me and Rini. It's an honor.
No.
I would love to be
You're
there.
both-
Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie Rishani. I'm the founder and CEO of Alpine Bio. We are a molecular farming company, which means that we have mastered the way to modify plant genetics and essentially code them to produce various valuable proteins. We're starting with producing dairy proteins in plants. We look at plants as the most efficient, cost-effective, and scalable biomanufacturing platform on the planet. Obviously, there are other tools like precision fermentation or cell cultures that exist out there and that have been extensively leveraged for producing pharmaceutical or specific enzymes. However, as you all know, food is commoditized and it needs to be extremely affordable. So we have focused our efforts on building, for the last 8+ years, a platform that produces the most economical, cost-effective COGS for making valuable food type proteins. So excited to be here. Our first focus is on dairy proteins, and we're looking at applications that go all the way from pure food to nutraceutical applications. So happy to share more and excited to join this panel. Thank you.
Great to have you, Maggie. So I think everyone can appreciate we have quite a broad spectrum of backgrounds, experiences, and I think this is going to make for a really rich and fun discussion. So just want to note we will have about 15 to 20 minutes for questions. But with that, let's dive into our first topic. I think to understand the future of food and agriculture, it always starts in my mind with the consumer. And as we've all seen, there have been some, probably in the history of food, some of the most significant changes in consumer attitudes, habits, practices, desires, where consumers are thinking increasingly not just about what they are eating and wanting to experience more and different non-traditional foods, but also caring more about how that food is produced. And so with that, I'm going to ask James, who probably has just great perspective on seeing this arc, to set the the literal table for us. So James, over to you, please.
Jim, and I'll just make a few comments on what I've seen really across, importantly, the last decade. And for me, it always starts with a consumer lens. There's a significant consumer movement to more whole foods. From a dietary perspective, there is a significant movement for cleaner labeled products. But one of the more significant changes I've seen is the movement to adding higher proteins in our diet. About 71% of all consumers are looking for ways to get more protein into diets, and you're finding that in, I've got a 25-year-old daughter who has jerky kind of in her car as her way to kind of increment the protein that she gets on a daily basis. Folks are looking to take sugar out of their diets, as an example. And one of the most significant changes over the last 2 or 3 years is the emergence of GLP-1s for weight management and to address other health issues. And there are issues both in what products complement GLP-1s as you're going on them and then as you're coming off. But GLP-1s are having a significant impact on the consumer packaged goods industry. And there are winners and losers as folks are doing less snacking and some of those things as they go on the GLP-1s. And then there's an emergence of brands that have higher protein that actually complement folks that go on the GLP-1s. And maybe the final point I'd make here is the rapid growth of Mediterranean based diets, which tie to the first point I made around more whole foods. I happen to sit on the board of one of the fastest growing restaurant chains, Cava, and that's an example of the growth of the Mediterranean diet as a kind of a mainstream dynamic. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, James. And you bring up a couple of good points. As many of our audience may appreciate, Mediterranean diet is consistently considered to be one of the healthiest diets globally, both in terms of observational studies as well as even randomized controlled studies. And so it certainly seems like a trend that's here to stay. I was wondering, John, with your background originally in nutritional biochemistry and then on the consumer product side, I was wondering if you could touch on some of those areas, especially GLP-1s. Is this, sort of a fad, or is this something that's going to really drive a real change in terms of product demand?
I think it's going to change a lot of things. And I still have a lot of contacts back to my pharma days, and everybody in pharma is telling me that GLP-1s are only going to get better, more available. I think there was clinical trial data published from Eli Lilly of an oral delivered product recently. And And side effects, they will work on the side effects. That's what they do. So, maybe not now, but over time, there'll be less side effects. It'll force people to change their diets. It's negatively impacting a lot of companies that sell snacks. That's not a bad thing. The type of snacks will be different and the type of products will be different. So it creates great opportunity. James mentioned protein. I think that we should be talking as much about fiber and other macronutrients. I think, protein seems to be the default if I want to eliminate sugar or make a healthier snack. And I came from a guy that sold protein in my career. But I see that it creates a little bit of an imbalance. So I think one of the areas that I'm starting to see more traction is fiber, especially a conversation about fiber as a prebiotic. And I think that is where we'll start seeing benefit. And even though I've only spent a small amount of time, Ashley, in the microbiome for both plants, I think that there will be massive microbiome effects by all the diet changes and the new foods. And so I think focusing on the right fibers and the right kind of food products could lead to benefits beyond just the weight loss.
Great. Thank you, John. Ashley, with someone has an intense interest and understanding of the microbiome, how do you see what do consumers understand about the microbiome, probiotics, prebiotics, and how do you see that future playing out?
Well, actually, it's a perfect question because everyone here seems to understand the importance of microbes in human and animal and soil health, but we just really haven't had the tools that we need to really understand some of the mechanisms of action and understanding how they're working together, how they're modulating expression of gene expression in the gut, etc. So one area I'm especially excited about is spatial biology. So specifically a tool called HyperFish. So it's HIPRFISH. You can look it up. There's a Nature publication developed by Canvas Biosciences, which I've disclosed. I'm on their board. There's also a new publication that's open source, that's preprint, that goes through how this technology is using for microbes. But I think this is so important, not just in the pharma therapeutic side, but this is going to really help bridge our food as medicine and understanding how how microbes break it down and how it's affecting our GI tract. And so just to contextualize it really quickly, as a pathologist, I'm always looking at patterns to diagnose disease under the microscope. It could be IBD, it could be celiac disease, it could be colon cancer. And we've been doing this for decades. That's not new. But what's new is we can now digitize these patterns and understand them. And what spatial biology is, now we can also unlock their molecular features at the same time. So we can look at the RNA, the protein, and even the microbes in the original spatial context. And this allows us to really understand how these are all integrating together. So Nature called spatial biology the method of the year about 4 years ago. But just even in this 4-year span, it's gone from very low resolution to high resolution to very high and multiplexed. And Canvas is the first one that's now a platform that's able to also detect microbes. And what makes it so interesting is that they're doing a better job at identifying microbes and sequencing. And they can even do this in a very low biomass situations. So they're doing it in 2 dimensions, eventually will be 3 dimensions, but kind of think of it as like the Google Maps for microscopic biology. And so what will this unlock? And this is what I'm hoping we'll get into some conversations. There are a lot of commercial opportunities that can finally come out of this. We can, if you're taking a probiotic, do we know if it engrafts? We've never been able to say that. We now have the tool to do that. Do we understand the mechanism of action? Do we understand how these microbes are actually breaking down and using fibers? Because they can actually identify the type of fiber in the microbe, et cetera. So this is really going to help us. And I don't want to take too much time here, but this is where we could really have a lot of questions to ask and answer, including GLP-1. So people brought up the GLP-1. All right, what cells express that? Neuroendocrine cells in the GI tract. So what microbes help turn on and off that signaling? How do they work together? These are all questions that we could answer with that platform.
Great. Thank you. I think, Ashley, Rini, I think you had a comment.
I didn't mean to interrupt the flow of introductions, but I was curious after listening to James and Jonathan. James, you have this very clear, opinion and around the consumer, and proteinification of food has been a trend. Jonathan brought up fiber. Ashley talked about, prebiotics and probiotics. Are consumers now also, demanding the fiberification of food? Are you seeing that?
I think they're asking for two things. I agree with the addition of fiber. They're looking for more protein wherever they can find it in their diets, and then fiber is a complement to protein versus a default. And all that trends to taking sugar and kind of carbs out of the diet, at least from where I sit.
Maggie, one thing I wondered if you could comment on, the final aspect that I've seen in terms of consumer trends is I would say, greater openness and interest in experimentation, as well as considering alternative sources, or I would say generally non-traditional sources. And since you are of foods, and since you're really one of the both scientific and thought leaders in this space, I'm curious if you could comment on what you're seeing, because I think all of us saw the explosion of interest with companies like Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods, and then moving into cultured meats, which sort of peaked and now have faded. What do you think is actually lasting, and how do you view what are going to be the sustained trends here?
Thank you, Jim. That's a great question. We actually have been doing some consumer studies to get direct data from people. And obviously, like, protein is the number one thing. So we asked people, what is the number one thing that you are looking for in like products that you buy? And dairy protein was number one across the demographic that we interviewed. So it's really interesting because philosophically, I feel like we follow trends versus, and maybe Pamela can comment on that, versus look at root cause solutions, and Ashley can comment on that too, to health. So my hesitation is like, yes, there's definitely a lot of demand for protein. There's a lot of excitement around plant-based. We've seen excitement about high protein diets in the past with Atkins. So things come and go, right? Things come and go. And I think that you can always adapt your platform and what you're doing to position it for success with what's happening. But at the same time, we're seeing, depending on the demographic, like when we look at Gen Z and younger generations, there's a lot more openness to exploration with food. There is serious concern, even though we're not talking about sustainability anymore as part of the diet, but there is serious concerns around sustainability, and figuring out how to make products that are good for you and good for the planet. I think that's ultimately what's gonna win in the long term, despite the trends of the moment. I think we need to solve for that, and we need to look at health not in like, yes, you can inject yourself, but there's a lot of great foods that are available that we can be eating, that we're not eating. And I grew up on the Mediterranean, so the Mediterranean diet is not like a fad for me. It's literally the diet I grew up eating. And even like adaptations of Mediterranean diet that I see in countries like the US, they're still pick and choose. It's not, I'm not seeing enough like whole foods and vegetables being incorporated, enough variety. So I'm maybe a bit less optimistic about true willingness for health. And I think we're still looking for shortcuts and we're following trends, even though we need to solve for health of people and the planet at the same time.
Well said, Maggie. And so I think this is a perfect segue into our second topic here, which is food is medicine. And I think you've heard, just as we set the stage from consumer trends, that there is, in fact, a majority of consumers now that are more thoughtful about their food choices and more interested in how they can improve their diet to overall improve their health span, and even longevity. And so with that, I would like to turn this over to Pam to talk about kind of set the stage for food as medicine. You know, before we had modern pharmaceuticals and the pharmaceutical industry, all cultures turned to foods and plants as the way for healing. And it's fascinating to see now that we have a better understanding of that connection. So that ancient wisdom, in fact, was true wisdom that's scientifically backed. So with that, Pam, I'm wondering if you can start us off.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. To get us started, food and nutrition related disease have been on the rise in the recent years, and we're seeing a lot of stakeholders leaning in to be part of the solution. And so just to give you a flavor of some of the challenges we're seeing in our own membership, which may be some of your employees, we launched a study of 10,000 members not too long ago, asking about their general health and also their related social factors, including their ability to afford healthy food. And we found that 25% reported that they struggle to buy food, including fruits and vegetables, and that they told us they either run out of food by the end of the month or worry that they will, and that they won't be able to buy more. And when we looked at our population with Medicaid plans, this was 50%. So if you think about, I mentioned earlier, we have 12.5 million members. These are millions of people that struggle with getting access to healthy food because they can't afford it. And we also know that the costs associated with treating diet-related disease are just simply not sustainable. And Jim mentioned in the intro, I think it was Rockefeller, that each year unhealthy diets and food insecurity cause more than 500,000 deaths. And Jim mentioned that it costs the U.S. economy $1.1 trillion in healthcare and also lost productivity costs. So again, productivity touches your world as well. And we think that food as medicine efforts hold immense potential in addressing hunger, but also in improving nutrition and health. And we also believe that healthcare organizations have a unique role to play in things like testing innovations, contributing to the evidence base of what works and under what conditions, which target populations, what's the dose and duration of food as part of treating and preventing diet-related disease. And also that healthcare has a role in really the policy conversations, that they're centered around health and also health equity. And I would say over the past maybe 5 years, we're seeing food as medicine really woven into the fabric of healthcare in super exciting ways. I mentioned that Kaiser Permanente launched a Center of Excellence, and the idea of this is to really bring all of our robust resources in things like how we address nutrition and diet-related disease challenges for our members, to really transform. The idea is to really transform how we treat and prevent diet-related disease and address hunger. And since the announcement of the center, which was just a year ago, we've been really working to take the vision to a reality. And the key to our success, I think, has been the genuine enthusiasm and deep engagement of our workforce. And I say this because I think it's happening in healthcare across the nation. As I mentioned earlier, I've been at Kaiser Permanente for over 20 years, and I've never seen so much enthusiasm for a topic of any kind as I do now in this food as medicine space. And when we were designing the Center of Excellence, we engaged over 500 stakeholders across our organization. So this included our patients, again, your employees, our dietitians, our patient navigators, physicians, and leaders from like our Medicaid and Medicare line of business, and so many others. But we heard from our patients and members, which again are our customers and your employees, that this was really important to them, that they wanted to change how they eat. And we also learned from our frontline care teams that they wanted more tools in their tool belt to be able to treat and prevent diet-related disease, that it was showing up in their patient interactions, and they needed more tools and so much enthusiasm about innovative ways to treat and prevent diet-related disease and more ways to support their patients. And I wanted to put a pin in two more things. We're also hearing from our commercial insurance customers. Probably a number of you all in this room are Kaiser Permanente customers, but employers are knocking on our door asking for help. Like, how do we partner to build food as medicine type interventions for our customers? And I feel very sure that there's a path for healthcare and employers to do work together. But I also feel like we need to figure out what the right interventions are and how to pay for it. These diet-related diseases are creating challenges for both insurance, health insurance, and care delivery, but also for employer groups. And so we need to understand more about the evidence, like who are the target populations, what are the most effective interventions, and how can we partner with employers to really deploy in a workplace setting, how best to support our employees. And so at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. I think it's health and well-being and transforming the way that we treat and prevent diet-related disease and address hunger. And it's, for me, super exciting to see how much enthusiasm there is in this space and all the new players that are rolling up their sleeves and trying to be part of the solution. And I am incredibly optimistic about what's possible here. And I know just how much also research and innovation plays a role in making sure that we change the trajectory of diet-related disease and hunger. And I want to say one more thing before I turn it over, that this GLP-1 thing is huge. It's a huge cost and concern for healthcare. There are lots of concerns about a cost perspective and also a care perspective, because more people, when you're on GLP-1 drugs, you need to come in for care in more often. And then it creates all kinds of problems for access to care for other people as well, and cost of care for the broader everybody. So just putting a pin that this is real. It's a real challenge for the nation, and I don't have line of sight into the world, but I do think also there's a role for food as medicine in the GLP-1 world, and we have to understand it better. We need more evidence about how they intersect. Is it an on-ramp? Is it an off-ramp? Is it instead of for some patients? And what role does nutrition education and all the products that we've been talking about play in these treatment plans? And so I'm excited about what's possible here, and I'm also nervous about what might happen if we do nothing.
Yeah, no, thanks, Pam. And, I think Pam touched on, some of the key themes here of just the amazingly large impact for good that food as medicine can have, but there are a number of barriers here that she brought up in terms of affordability and access, especially from the communities that could benefit most from food as medicine. Of course, the impact of chronic disease that continues to, I think, grow and represents something like 85% of our total healthcare spend on treating chronic diseases, not curing them. And then finally, what the roles are in actually improving access through medical practitioners, as well as employers who are increasingly concerned about the impact of chronic disease on both the welfare of their teams as well as productivity. Jake, I'm curious. I knew you had a comment here, and I'm curious how you are viewing this trend, especially with real strong connection with farmers and the whole agricultural supply chain.
Yeah. So first off, Pam, thanks for teeing up the overall perspective. Super helpful. I think I want to add, some of them are maybe counterpoints or opposing views of Pam's view, which I don't necessarily have a take on. I want to share what I would describe as like large scale agriculture's perspective in this current state, right? So row crop farming in the US is the largest provider of protein and calories and carbs around the world, probably. And the challenge we have is not one of lack of calories. It's really important for the world to understand that we have more than enough food. If you bucket everything in that bucket, we have more than enough to make sure nobody starves. And yet there are however many hundreds of millions of people who are near starvation, daily. And so the problem is logistics. The problem is maybe delivery method of the calories. And then in the first world that we live in, the right type of calories to keep us healthy when we have a lot of options. And so I think we have this battle in ag. All of our customers that I work with are the guys buying major soybean, corn production in this country that produces feed for animals, which produce the protein that we typically are looking at. You get fuel, in some cases, in ethanol and renewable fuels, and then directly food, in many cases, as an ingredient, and sometimes highly processed, right? And a lot of times highly processed. And so I was looking the other day at a bottle of ranch. Do you know that I'm from North Dakota and very Norwegian, so ranch is kind of my spice in my life next to ketchup. And so when I look at like a bottle of ranch, the entire like 80-90% of that bottle is vegetable oil. And then there's a little bit of ingredients that go in there to make it ranch. And we all know there's a debate now on like these seed oils, what is good or not for us. And I think it's certainly, we know that highly processed is hard for our bodies. I don't think there's much debate there, whether it's corn syrup or vegetable oils. But the problem right now in the US is we have a demand issue for the crops that we grow. We need more trading partners around the world to want to buy our feed and other products. And if we were to pile on the tariff battle and then the food problem in the US, the farmers wondering what are they supposed to do and how should they do their job. And now the good news is that farmers are resilient in the sense that if we get a clear set of rules to play by, or there's a clear direction the market wants to go, the whole market will adopt that path. They will adapt to it. They will move towards solving these problems. It's incredible what we can do, but we got to get clear on these problems because we can't like reduce. If we were to go backwards on the calories we produce in this country, we will starve more people around the world. So we don't want to do that, but we also want to get people healthier. And it's clear that we have our own problems in the US on the health issue. And so that's just a perspective I want to share where we've got a supply demand issue, particularly a demand problem for major row crops in the US. And we know we can be healthier and do better. And so it's an interesting battle where I think the farmers just saying, hey, tell us what we need to do. We will do it the best we can do. We also want the world to be healthy. We're not opposed, right? And so how do we get clear?
No, Jake, that's a great point, which is it all starts with the farmer who are responding to sustained consumer trends. And, I think as Jake indicates, there is a mismatch here between between our traditional system, which is highly concentrated in a number of row crops, and now consumer interest in a more diverse set of foods. And so I guess I'm curious, John, as with your background in big food, or James, how you believe big food, which will continue to be a central part of delivering, safe, affordable, delicious foods to consumers, how they're thinking about food as medicine.
I think they like the idea that there's an opportunity there, but I think they're going to struggle. Their systems are set up to make lots of food, make it with a high margin, use ingredients that are low cost. It's difficult to launch new brands. And as much as we can talk about how people want to be healthier, you actually check what people eat. Even when you offer them healthier food, they usually don't eat it. I'm experienced back in the day when we owned Naked Juice, and we had a meeting with the team at Naked Juice, and one of the employees said, well, I eat healthy and clean and local, organic whenever I can, but I still have to have a Twinkie. So people's diets are always going to be diverse. They're going to be driven by a lot of different things. And so I think the transition, it's important that we work on it, but I think it's going to be a lot harder than people think. And then secondly, we talk about like diet-related disease and GLP and everything else. There's a huge psychological and behavioral component that we have to deal with, because there's a lot of people that are educated to know they should eat differently, but they don't. And it's not because of lack of education. So if we're going to tackle this problem, we're gonna have to tackle it from a lot of different places. GLP-1, this is the last comment here, it has taken a hit on the consumption of high calorie foods. And we're starting to see it in the snack, where people are wanting a diversity of snacks and more healthy snacks. Potato chips aren't going away, but there are more healthy options. And those companies are trying to figure out a way, to be fair, to make as much money selling healthy snacks as they can make selling tortilla chips and potato chips and cookies and crackers. You know, maybe more nuts would be good. I think it's going to be a longer transition, but they have to work on it because they know what's happening. It's going to go slow. It just will go slow.
And the only thing I'd add, I absolutely agree with everything that all the points that John made. I just think you're going to see more and more of the investments in the transition to healthier foods. Big companies like Nestle talk about food as medicine now in ways that they wouldn't have historically. But it'll be a long transition. And at the end of the day, and I wanted to say this earlier, wherever the innovation happens, food has to taste good. That's going to be one of the barriers to any of the transitions that we talk about. As I think about and Jim, you made this point, the rise and significant decline of alternative proteins, taste was the barrier to scaled adoption. There will be a 2.0 or 3.0 of that movement, but the taste barrier will have to be resolved for us to have significant scaling.
I don't know if you had read, but when was it? Last week, we saw the Hershey acquired Lesser Evil. I think it was a $750 million deal, and Lesser Evil is a brand of snack, it's popcorn, but they use seed-free oil. They use like avocado oil, and that's how they market themselves, as an anti-inflammatory, snack, or a snack that is not inflammatory. I don't think they're anti, but they're non-inflammatory. But I think, to your point, James, yes, big food is starting to, at least on the surface level, move in that direction.
Yeah. And so what I think the audience can take away, and we're going to move to our next topic here, is there's continues to be a growing body of science supporting the role of food as a vector for good. But I think what you've also heard is, at the end of the day, again, we can't forget the consumer. Consumers' behaviors oftentimes don't follow their aspirations. Look at those New Year's resolutions around dieting as just one example. And so I think James said it well, and John, that this adoption and movement of food as medicine will in fact be a slow process. And as Jake indicated, we're dealing with a very large infrastructure that's invested in our current food system. So changing that or evolving that may happen over time, but that literally may take decades. So thanks, everyone. And I'm sure I would expect we'll have some questions here. So to move to our next topic, that is, in fact, a pretty good introduction to the transformation of the modern farm. And we'll take a global perspective here. And And Jake, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about some of the work that you're doing, the use of digital tools, some of the barriers, though, to changes, and you alluded to some of them. So, Jake, can you kick us off, please?
Yeah. So here's something that I would challenge this group to think about. The farmer, this has been a thesis of Bushels for some time.
Mm-hmm.
The farmer is not the adoption problem. The problem exists. So first off, farmers get, at least in the US, 30 attempts, 40 attempts in their life to get the crop right. It's not like it's software where we iterate and break stuff
Mm-hmm.
today and tomorrow it's fixed and we're fine. And so the idea that farmers even adopt technology tools every year at all is fascinating, and they do. And so, like, the reality of 10 years ago where we said, hey, farmers aren't ready for technology, that is completely false. We're actually at a stage where the farmer's preference, we do a study called the State of Farm every year. We have 1,300 farmers responding, and we had two realizations this year. This is a US-centric view for now, but it's I think helpful. 50 is the new 40. That is one of the takeaways, in the sense that the mark of a tech adoption and tools and willingness to try new things on the farm is now at 50 years old and younger, is a huge tipping point where anybody under 50 is like, yep, we're going to try and change the way we do things, and we're willing to do it with technology. We believe technology can help us. That's a new trend. The second part is that the preference of the farmer for how they expect to do business going forward has shifted to where the farmer's preference is ahead of where the supply chain's tools and technology are. For example, more farmers want to be able to just be on their phone at 8 o'clock at night and offer to sell grain than the ability to actually do that is given. And so, like, the farmer is expecting that the convenience of the consumer should be in their business, and it's really lagging right now. And so what that really concludes is the supply chain players, the guys who are part of moving the crops around and buying and selling, they're actually the ones now that are lacking in adoption and trailing expectations of the farmers. So that tells me two things. One is big opportunity for companies trying to help those players move forward. And two, the farmer has shifted their mindset because of all the pressures around the world to where they're willing to try and push hard on what's possible to improve, particularly their, year to year, how do they improve their operation with tools and technology? And so that's a shift that's real. That's a trend we're seeing. And so if you're in the space, there's a lot of opportunity there to help.
Jake, I'm wondering if you could maybe also touch on maybe the case study, as we've seen the conversion to going from conventionally produced produce to organically produced, and now even thinking about regenerative practices. I was wondering, if you could share a perspective of what you're hearing on both the interest and some of the barriers there.
So one of the things that we talk about in the last few years, what's maybe being said by public companies and players that are in the supply chain of sort of a sustainability movement, and an interest to reduce carbon footprints, et cetera. There's a lot more talk than the reality on the ground of what's really being done in actual initiatives. And the farmer is even more skeptical. The farmer that I talk to in the Midwest, for example, is like offended that we would think that they are not interested in their soil health, in regenerative farming, in the idea that they take care of the land so it's here for the next 100 years. It's an offensive assumption that people make about the farm. And that's a real perspective. And what that does is that trickles down into farmers don't want to hear about this next sustainability startup that's trying to convince them to change a practice that they may not be here 2 years from now, and their payments may or may not come through. And this has created a really negative effect on a lot of farms. But then the counter is organic farms and the regenerative practices are real, and they're doing it. And a lot of these guys, give you an example, regenerative farming may include things like not tilling, because when you till your fields, you release the carbon that the plant had just put into the soil back into the air. It's one of the worst things to do, is to deep rip, for example, the soil. And so But in the northern plains, we have moved away from tillage practices years and years and years ago. But because that happened before these new trends, the farmer doesn't even get credit for that change of practice that happened. And it would actually make them more money if they started tilling again to then get paid to not till. That would be a practice change that would make them more money. That's wild. So our incentives are kind of broken. And this is not all to be negative, but I think there's counters to some of these points, but the farmer's perspective on average has been very skeptical. They believe they're doing a good job, period, and they're willing to hear what the market wants them to do. But if you're not going to make a market for it, they're certainly not going to have the margin to afford to do these things without outcomes that make sense to them. And sustainability also needs to mean financial sustainability. And right now, soybean farmer can't make any money, so they're not interested in hearing how you're going to tell them to change.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's, Jake, you're touching on the disconnect in a way, and some of the dissonance here that when they're not, in essence, economic or consumer-driven incentives, farmers are smart business people, but they're also very risk adverse naturally. As you said, you only have a certain number of times to get it right. And if you make a mistake, that can be very costly when you're living on very thin margins. So something for all of us to consider. Any other perspectives? I'm curious, Maggie, if you could share your views. Again, you're a change maker, but your business depends, of course, on ultimately working with farmers to change, to consider, planting not a traditional soybean, but an engineered soybean that can produce a healthy, very functional, non-dairy source of protein. What have you learned in your conversations there?
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. So I agree with Jake's comments because that's what I hear from growers that we have worked with and work with as well. A bit more of an optimistic spin on this, though, is this gives us the opportunity to rethink a little bit our food system. And in good times, like there's zero incentives to not just grow row crops for animal feed. That's kind of like, I'm gonna do this and that's it. I think in more challenging times, it opens the door for more creativity and trying new things. And I would say right now, we have more farmer demand than we have seeds to offer. And that's because farmers are business people. They're actually insanely business minded and pretty smart and make good economical decisions. And we're offering them the ability to grow the same crop that they know how to grow, but it's a higher value crop, meaning that instead of growing soybeans where the protein value is, let's say, depending on where it goes, but like up to $3 a kilogram, $4 a kilogram, we're growing proteins in there that can be valued anywhere from like $20 to $1,000 a kilogram. Right? And we get to buy 100% back of the crop. We get to share more of the profit, have guaranteed returns, which is impossible to do if you're just growing commodity. So I think I'm optimistic in a way that, hard times force you to adapt as a person, as a business. I mean, we're dealing with that right now in so many ways. It forces you to try things that you wouldn't have tried, to be nimble, to think outside the box. So there are opportunities to rethink how we have vast land that, for the most part, is being used to feed there's 90 billion animals that we feed to feed 7 billion people. We can grow crops that are higher value that feed people directly. So I'm very excited about that opportunity. And again, like I wish we had more acres that we can grow because there is a lot more demand. And it's also word of mouth. So we started with one farmer and the neighboring farmers found out about what we're doing and the experience they had. And it kind of like, that's the beautiful thing about being part of a community is word of mouth helps you grow. And when the farmers see the economic benefit, they tell their neighbors. To Jake's point, like, yeah, the no-till thing is so funny to me because most farmers are doing that. Like it's funny that it's being branded as like an innovative solution, but when we grow, like no-till, planting into having cover crops is another really, like honestly, not complicated, easy to implement tool that there's an upfront cost, but it pays for itself. So there's a lot of things that are not rocket science that we have access to that we can start doing. And we've tested it on our fields. We grew into cover crops, and there was a flooding. I'll tell you this last story, but there was a thunderstorms, really bad thunderstorms in Nebraska, and when we were planting, all the fields around us did not have cover crops and they flooded. Our field did not, and we did not have to irrigate because the soil retained the water. So again, like small tools when you start seeing the benefits, and now the neighboring fields are doing cover crops because they saw the experience we had, and the farmers we work with are doing cover crops for their future growth. So it's like an ecosystem. When you start seeing positive things, a lot of things grow. The biggest challenge I see is farmers don't get a big pie of the dollar amount. Like by the time, like Nestle makes a lot more money on selling products than the farmer who put probably a lot more effort, sweat and tears into it. And that's the piece of the food system, another piece that doesn't make sense.
Maggie, one more thing to add to your thinking, or for this group, I suppose. It is certainly more effective to deliver calories directly from the plants and these other products than it is to feed them to animals. But you have to also remember, and we know this in ag, of course, some places in the world, the only way to deliver these offerings and the protein needed to sustain their people is this fat sack of animal flesh walking around, because that is the best store of the energy for that we can really at least logistically figure out, it seems. And so that's part of why we have such large animal agriculture and why we feed so many animals, is because certain places in the world, there's just no other way to really deliver until we can innovate on the supply chain delivery of these products. And so that's the balance of the battle. It's totally true that it would be more efficient to not have to feed these things and let them walk around and burn off energy.
100, yeah, absolutely. It's very regional specific, but I would say that we've over-indexed on our reliance on less efficient tools. And I would add, Jake, that our plants are growing very valuable dairy proteins, for example. So like the farmers we work with grow cattle. They actually have cattle and they grow soybeans. And they were like, I would love to grow like my dairy proteins in the plant because the economic opportunity is there. And I think it's going to be a combination of both. I really think it's going to be a combination of both to get sustainability, economics, and health aligned. Because on top of taste, cost is another one. And again, I don't know if we're going to talk about this at some point, but it's insane to me that it's so much cheaper to go buy like a Big Mac from McDonald's than to buy a salad with vegetables. It's just that alone can tell you everything that's wrong with our food system, right? That's not okay. And a lot of it is tied to as well regulation and subsidies and things like that that have not been figured out.
Well, Maggie, I think we'll touch. Oh, go ahead, Jake.
I was just going to add one more animal perspective, another one that just kind of baffles the mind. So cattle, not original to the United States, for example, to the Americas, but we do have bison, well, the buffalo. And for some reason, largely due to consumer preferences, maybe market makers, the cow is the main source of sort of beef, right? This is how we do it. But if you go and spend any time studying the North American buffalo or the bison, it's almost insane that we don't just eat buffalo. They are way more effective. They don't die in the winter. They have very few diseases. They are built for this place. And of course, we killed them off a long time ago, but they've been coming back. But the consumer preference, I think, and the markets have driven us to the cattle, which is actually way harder to raise, way more time consuming, probably makes less money for everybody than the bison, but we don't use the bison at any scale. And actually so much so that we still import into the US buffalo from Canada because we don't even have big enough herds here. And so it's incredible what, like some of these things are just seemingly broken, or maybe the market's just created what they are, but maybe there's time to change some of these things. And it's just like another thing that doesn't make sense.
Great. Thank you, Jake. John, closing comments.
Yeah, let's take it back to the very beginning. It starts with the consumer. If the consumer is willing to pay more, full demand for regenerative practices and things like that, which maybe during a transition, it will eventually be as cost effective. And I played in this game when I was at Indigo Ag. Does it work? Does it not work? But during the transition, it costs more money to produce food in some of those methodologies. The consumer is unwilling to pay more. It's, to Jake's point, the farmer get even screwed worse if they makes that transition, spends more money, and then grows a crop, can't sell it for more. So just like the idea of people wanting to eat more healthy, people will always say they want to eat, more sustainable food or more local. We have to actually figure out ways to incentivize them. I think, Maggie, you made the point. Are our incentives aligned? Do we have enough incentives on farming for more beans, vegetables, and things like that to get make those more cost affordable? And could we create more innovation in that space? Because we have to create the demand pull. If there's never a demand pull, push or even sustainable market push, or how I feel about the environment push, in the long run doesn't work. It's gonna have to be an economic solution driven by demand.
Yeah. Jim, do you mind if I just insert
Yes,
one thing
please.
that I feel like maybe could connect it, but we need more information on it, because everyone keeps on talking about, again, Jake, Maggie, you've just mentioned all of these issues with incentives and demand. One thing that I think will become really interesting and connecting us back to our food and medicine conversation is what farming practices, however we want to describe it, because you're right, I think we don't really have great definitions for some of these things, but what farming practices lead to higher nutrient density in our food. And I think that's something that, as we get to understand that better, perhaps that would be something a consumer would pay for. We don't have that information yet, but right now we do know that the nutrient content in our food has declined up to 38% over the last 50 years of fruits and vegetables. And there's a hidden hunger epidemic with over 2 billion people that's characterized by lack of micronutrients and essential minerals that are decreased despite getting the sufficient caloric intake. And so there is emerging evidence, we need more of it, that this higher soil health, which we're defining through kind of like this soil organic matter, appears to be connected to higher nutrient density. So in the few studies that are out there, there was one that it showed produce had something like 11 to 34% higher nutrient density when it had good soil organic matter. Same thing in beef and pork, that there was higher levels of healthy fatty acids and bioactives. So again, we need more data in this area, but perhaps that would be this connection that we're looking for, where the consumer can drive this, and then there would be an incentive for a farmer to be like, if I do these practices, I might get better,
Yeah, exactly. Ashley. Pamela.
Yeah, and I wanted to give a parting shot as well, picking up on what Maggie said maybe 3 or 5 minutes ago, where she said the Big Mac is more expensive than the salad. I think we have to be solving creatively for the consumer that can't pay more, because I think the biggest barrier that I see within healthcare is people actually want to eat healthy. They need a little help knowing what healthy is, but it's not that they don't want to eat healthy. It's often that they can't afford it or don't have access to it or work 3 jobs and so drive by that Big Mac or whatever. But we have to make the healthy food affordable and accessible. And if we don't do that, then all the things that are down the road are going to be the trajectory of diet-related disease is going to be even more of a challenge for all of us.
Yeah, and Pam, to put a fine point on that, I think several studies have pointed out that if we actually focus and invest much more in preventative health, which would include food as medicine, the cost savings would in fact enable us to pay for healthcare for all. it's really a huge opportunity. And maybe that's the last topic to touch on, and just note we just have a few more minutes to go through it, is really the economics of all of this. And if you think about it, I think you've heard economics woven through all of these topics, in that right now we have a supply chain that doesn't sort of have, a situation where the farmer takes most of the risk but sees very little of the reward. We have incentives that are not right around to incentivize human and planetary health. And then there is the sheer fact that we have trillions of dollars invested globally in our current food and agriculture system, which has done many good things, but has challenges now. The affecting change in that will be, will take much capital and much time. And so with that, Rini, I'm wondering if you can kind of touch on, from your perspective as an investor, how we fund, really these transformational change agents, and what you see as the arc. How will things look in 10 or 20 years?
Hopefully I can put a positive spin on this, because I invest in technologies that are, basically future-proofing the food system. And we are seeing adoption of technologies from farm. Jake, we have some farmers that do like to adopt technology, even though I know technology has let farmers down largely, all the way through supply chain to the consumer on health and food. And these are, I think, the only tool that we have collectively to work toward reducing the cost of nutrition, not food, not calories, but nutrition, so that we can make that available to the masses. And Pamela, your comment about how do we make, it's about making nutrition available and making it affordable. I think it's about making nutrition convenient, because I think convenience has driven the unhealthy diet. It's cost and it's convenience. To your point about the families with two working parents, how do you do that quickly? I don't have time to come home and get fresh produce and chop a salad. McDonald's is much easier, and no one's going to fight me. So I think those are all problems that we need to solve for. And what we're investing in and seeing solutions, to ultimately improve the efficiency of the food system on farm, are around the labor. Labor is a huge problem on farms. If you're talking about permanent crops, labor is, 35 to 40% of your cost of growing your crop. I think it's something like 13 to 14% of non-permanent crop farming. So autonomous vehicles are a way that we can start solving those problems and reducing that cost, and we're seeing adoption there. In supply chain, we're seeing advanced APIs, really harmonized data, which is immediately reducing the roughly 30% of food that gets wasted in the supply chain. And that is going back to the consumer and the cost of the good. It positively impacts every stakeholder. And then on the food as medicine side, adherence is a huge problem. And Pamela, you must think about this all the time. I know that we're seeing payer providers, healthcare employers, all working toward figuring out how to cover food as medicine, because it pays itself back tenfold if you can reduce, lifestyle diseases and the cost of that epidemic. But how do you get somebody to adhere to eating well, aside from the GLP-1s? And if you cover, a registered dietitian who meets with you once a week or once every 2 weeks, you're not helping increase adherence, because they're giving you a prescription, a protocol to follow. But I'm making a decision to choose between healthy or unhealthy food 4 times a day. So this means that I I need to have that touch point, but a dietitian's not getting paid for that. So this is where we're seeing AI agents really enable and sort of accelerate and advance the capabilities of these physicians, these clinicians, to work with people on helping them on their diets multiple times a day. So I think these technologies are absolutely going to advance the food system and make food healthier and more affordable across the board.
Great. Thank you, Rainey. I'd like to now spend the last 15 minutes taking some questions on everything you've heard. And so one topic we do want to get to is because I see several questions in the chat related to it as regulations, both from the role that they play as a barrier in creating the positive incentives for change. But before we get to that, Dick, can you pose your question and we'll take it to the panel.
It's Dirk, but go ahead.
Dirk, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm misreading this.
All right,
Thank
go
you.
ahead, Dirk.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so I'm Dirk Schapler. I work for a Japanese company that is working on spark plugs, but we are investing also in clean tech and food and agriculture technologies. So the question that I have is related to preventing food loss. So we talked a lot about how to eat healthier and how to produce more reliable and so. But the numbers that I'm getting from our research is that there is a tremendous amount of food loss along the supply chain. Once the food is produced, but all the way to the different steps, there's always like so much waste, and I'm wondering why there is not more activity there to just use better what we already have. And so maybe my numbers are wrong, or maybe it's too difficult, but I'd just like to hear what maybe some of the experts have to say to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dirk. Who would like to take that?
Jim,
Rainey?
Go ahead, Rainey. Go ahead.
Food loss is a big issue. In fact, it's something we spend a lot of time focusing on at our fund. And there have been, not many solutions that I would say are able to tackle this very, very complicated problem, because often you need a unique solution for all the different regional places to manage food loss. But we're seeing things happen around upcycling, organic waste. What we found to have the most leverage is the company I'd mentioned before, which was advanced APIs to harmonize the data between a Walmart and a Pepsi, so that they are sending the right food at the right time to the retailer, so it's not sitting on the shelves too long and it's not getting wasted and not spoiling. And immediately, once you harmonize that data, we're seeing mid to high single digits reduction in waste.
Yeah, so go ahead, John.
In my advisory practice, we've worked with several companies working on technical solutions to extend shelf life so that supply chains last longer. It also maintains quality, because you need to maintain that quality. So I do think there will be technical challenges. A company I work with using silk protein to extend the life of leafy greens by 4 or 5 days. I mean, that's worth a ton. We had the company appeal that extends the shelf life. So there can be some technical breakthroughs help increase shelf life on some of these products. And I think that that is really going to be an important area to look at, because Jake made the comment earlier, we can create enough food. I mean, every time somebody at an ag conference says we need triple yields, I always want to scream, don't need to triple yields. We need to get stuff where it needs to go. If we could just extend the shelf life of most foods by like 3 or 4 days only, maybe even a week, we would be solving most of these potential problems. So I think that's would be a great focus for new tech startups, is to continue to work on ways we can do this. And it includes things like the microbiome and understanding plant respiration, even like super freezing technologies that don't ruin food are all companies I've seen working in this space. So I'm bullish that they're hopefully more funding will start going in that direction.
Great, thank you, John. I'm going to try and consolidate a couple of questions and comments that I've seen around the role of regulations in the future of food and agriculture. And so I'd like to pose a provocative rapid fire question to our panel. If you could wave your magic wand in the next 10 years, what is the one change you'd like to see any government make that will promote a better, healthier, more sustainable food and agriculture system? So, Maggie.
Science over political opinions.
Okay, there you have it. See a thumbs up on that. John.
I agree with Maggie. I think we need global standards of what science means. I work with European companies. They're struggling to get their food into the US because of regulation. There are companies that are in the US developing new technologies or new ingredients, and then they can't sell them in Europe. And it's, standardizing what is safe, what is permitted, and the process by which we test and approve could go a long way to getting things into the market, faster. And look what we're doing with eliminating artificial color.
Yeah.
Science should say we should eliminate toxic molecules from the diet. I don't know that artificial or natural necessarily means healthier. To have a science standard for what is safe, and let science be harmonized in a way that we can all agree that it means.
So science-based, globally harmonized regulations.
Yeah,
thank
great.
you. James.
I don't think I can add to that.
Okay.
Reduce the bureaucracy.
Great. Rini.
You hit on both of them. Science first and eliminate the bureaucracy and subsidies.
Okay. Ashley.
Well, I'm definitely a fan of the science first, but I will also say that it depends on what policies we're going after. But if we're talking about farming, and in this case, let's say, promoting regenerative agriculture, I think there's 4 things. It'd be more flexible finance, having more cultural, technical, and educational access, really improving the supply chain, and also having, right definitions for consumers. And then the big thing, and I think even Jake maybe have mentioned this, I'm not sure, but removing those policies that are barriers.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. Jake.
I'm going to, at risk of having a politically charged view on this still, I think the science problem is many people feel we were just lied to for 4 years ago. It's a real feeling. And I think in some cases that's true. In other cases it's exaggerated, but it's not helping the case. So I agree, science first, but we got to figure out how to tell when we're looking at science and not being motivated by ulterior motives. Second point, fair trade would go a long ways. I think equal or free trade is challenging still, no matter how we look at it, but fair trade where products can go to markets on merit and not on policy or other crazies or barriers is what we want to try to get to. And I'm hopeful that we can figure that out in the coming years here as a country in the US, but maybe with our partners around the world as well. If we can get to fair trade where markets don't have unfair barriers or ridiculous barriers, then we can maybe figure out what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, you're bringing a great point. Again, hearing this theme around, we have a shared global interest in a better food system, and again, having more openness and equal playing field will help the world get to better solutions. Pam.
I agree with the science comments and also the bureaucracy comments, but I have a slightly different take on what would be helpful because of where I sit in healthcare. But I think if we could allow healthcare to use the evidence base to target the right populations with the right interventions in the most cost-effective way, then we can change how food as medicine is able to be used in a cost-effective and scaled way across the nation and maybe even the world. But right now there are barriers to who we can target and for how long and with what. And so it's also reconsidering the regulatory barriers and also the science has been very much evolving in a good way in the evidence world of food as medicine, but some of the regulatory barriers are in the way of us implementing the science.
Yeah. No, thank you. And I think the thing that I would add here is because I think these are all great comments, is right now, as a wise person once said, be careful what you incentivize, it may come true. I think we have, and I think the point was made earlier, essentially regulations that have misaligned incentives with, overall what would be considered the greater economic human health and planetary health good. So if we start to address those, if we move to more science-based, harmonized regulations around the world, we will eliminate many of these barriers to adoption of new technologies that can really drive positive change. So I think all well put. Let's see, I think we have 3 more minutes here. So any other questions from our audience? Anyone want to raise their hand? I'm just going to scroll through some of the comments or questions here.
Jim, while you do
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
someone raised their hand.
Oh,
I was just gonna add one other quick comment is that the challenge with food or health is that it tends to be there's a lot of influencers that don't have Ashley's credentials or training or background or focus that have strong opinions and they end up becoming somehow like facts. So that's like a big barrier that I see that we need to overcome. And the other piece is and Ashley and I talked about this, but like traditional medicine is so limiting in what it teaches, and holistic approaches to nutrition and health it's almost like here's a pill versus like let's look at root cause and fix it. So just wanted to throw these 2 comments out.
no, thank you, Maggie. I had 2 hands up. I'm gonna ask them in order. Sandor, good to see you again.
So first off, thank you to everyone. This is a great discussion. I was particularly interested to hear if any of the panelists have comments on indoor agriculture. I was super interested to hear about the work that Alpine is doing for field crops, that there's been a lot of interest in using indoor controlled agriculture for biological and molecular crops. I was wondering if anyone had opinion or point of view on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandor. Rini, I'm wondering from an investment standpoint, you've seen the arc of vertical farming. Would you like to answer that question?
Sure. I think the world of controlled environment agriculture has been under the shadow of vertical farms, which were not the right solution for the market. And unfortunately, we built it before we did the math. And so a lot of people lost a lot of money. But on the greenhouse side, where you don't pay for sunlight, the industry has been growing at a 19% CAGR. And it's been a really wonderful way to very kind of efficiently grow because you are using precision agriculture. You're not overwatering, you're not over, fertilizing, there's no pesticide. And I think there's a future where controlled environment agriculture and these greenhouses become metro adjacent, increasingly more metro adjacent, so we can have fresh produce delivered to dense populations in short periods of time without allowing them to spoil. So actually, there's been a lot of advancements in CEA, but not on the, I'd say more on the greenhouse side, or there's versions of greenhouses that look different than a beautiful glass house.
Yeah. Yeah, it's finding its footing to the right applications. Good question.
So, Jim?
Eric.
Hey, Jim?
Yep.
We are at 9:30, and and frankly, Eric has his hands up, but he did put a nice note into our chat for folks, and we are going to be heading into our breakout rooms because we have we have so much experience and knowledge in our audience today, so it's an opportunity for every one of you to actually engage and meet other leaders that have both experience and on the innovation side and actually in the industry, and the rest of us who may only have experience just eating the results of all the folks in the industry. But first of all, I just want to say thank you so much to our incredible panelists today and Jim Flatt. It was really a deep conversation that I get to enjoy every day, but to bring you all together and have this kind of level of really interesting conversations on complex topics of something that means so much to everybody is really really incredible. So thank you so much for joining us. We are going to go into the breakout rooms now, and you'll have that opportunity to engage, put issues on the table. Please, you should have an Alliance moderator in the room. So quickly introduce yourselves, just 10 seconds, because we don't have time to go as deep, and well, just less than an hour. But introduce yourselves, put an issue or question on the table, and the moderator will help get to the best one. So with that, I'm opening up the room, and thanks. We'll come back about 5-10 minutes early, just a quick summarize before the end of the next hour. All right. So, thank you,
Paul.